Hey guys, how you going? Hope you're all doing very well. This evening I'm going to be doing another movie review. This movie is a horror film from Spain, Spanish language English subs, released in the year 2016, directed by Uritz Zualaga, and this film is called The Glass Coffin. So The Glass Coffin starts off with this very well-known Spanish actress. She's very famous and she's going to an award ceremony in order to give a speech for a Lifetime Achievement Award. And so she's practicing her speech inside the limousine. She's talking to her husband. She says that she's very nervous, but unfortunately the limousine goes past the destination, so she wants to know what's going on, but she realizes that the doors are locked, and so she's not able to get out. So she's pleading with the driver to stop, but she's not hearing anything back. But then she soon realizes that she's going to be put through a series of humiliating tasks that is basically going to make her realize that her life is in danger. So why she's in the limousine and why she can't get out and what she's going to have to do in order to try and save her own life is something you're going to have to find out for yourself, because that's as far as I'm going with my synopsis. Now, my thoughts on The Glass Coffin. I was actually quite excited to see this film because Spanish horror is definitely very well known as far as foreign cinema is concerned. When it comes to Spanish films in general, you think of directors such as Alex de la Iglesia, Guillermo del Toro. You got films such as Kidnapped, which is a fantastic extreme horror film. You've also got a very good suspenseful thriller called King of the Hill. So all these movies, horror, thrillers, basically all across all genres, Spain is very, very competent. So for that reason, I was very intrigued to see what The Glass Coffin could produce. Now, this is a lower budget movie, but I was still hoping that it had the similar Spanish flair, and it was going to be something that I would remember for a very long time. But unfortunately, after watching this movie, although it's very well made and actually very impressive, it still doesn't have that X factor because of the fact that I believe that it is a stage play. It's a movie that does take a very limited setting, very limited characters, and I just don't think it has enough quality to really push it over the line as far as cinematic film is concerned. Now, that is not necessarily a completely bad thing because this is a lower budget horror film. Now, a lot of low budget horror directors, they have the curse of trying too extravagant. Being too extravagant, therefore it comes across as cringeworthy, and you can notice the shortcomings as far as budget constraints are concerned. But this movie does have a lot of self-awareness, whether it's from the very limited setting of the limousine or if it's the 77-minute runtime. Everything feels as though it knows exactly what it wants to do. Therefore, it never outstays its welcome, it never becomes boring, and it's never cringeworthy. In fact, you can become absorbed into everything that is going on. And so I thought the cinematography is fantastic. I thought the overall limited setting of the limousine, it takes place for 90% of this film, and the limousine felt like a character of its own, because as these horrible things start happening to this main character, the limousine felt as though it was getting smaller and smaller. It was actually suffocating her. So the claustrophobia that the movie produces is that very strong psychological demon that the movie actually engulfs the viewer with. And so I thought, all right, well, this is a very uncomfortable movie. This is uncomfortable through that psychology. It's uncomfortable through the very good cinematography, very vibrant colours. It actually felt like a different dimension, which gives it that nightmarish feel. And the nightmarish feel is complemented very well by the series of humiliating things that this director is actually putting not only the character through, but also the viewer. And the fact that we get to know a little bit about this character gives the movie even more punch when these horrible things are happening. Therefore, it actually gives you the impression that these horrible things are there for a reason, as opposed just to be exploitative. Now, a lot of these exploitation films, they just want to shock you by putting something very graphic on screen, whether it's gratuitous nudity or sex or violence. It's very cheap. It's jump scares. It's stuff that you don't really have to sustain. But this movie sustains it in a way that feels very unnerving. And there are two scenes in particular that I thought were very, very brutal, and they serve their purpose. It actually felt like it was part of the story, that it was an evolution of this story, and it never felt like it was cheap. And so I thought that the cinematography, as I said, excellent. You've got the very strong sense of violence that you don't become desensitized to because it's not excessive, but it's enough to really strike home what it's going to take for this main character to realise her shortcomings. And the way that this woman actually starts to analyse herself was actually quite emotional. And it was something that a lot of people see celebrities as people who are basically void of a personality, void of decency. And when she starts to second guess herself because of all the horrible things she's been put through, it ultimately poses the question, what will it take for some people to realise what they're doing? And so this main character, I thought that was very absorbing and very interesting, and it wouldn't have been possible if it wasn't for the very good performance from the main actress. Now, Acting and script works both hand in hand. It needs to be a partnership. Without a good script, the acting can't be good, and without good acting, the script really can't be any good. So it has to have that partnership, and I think this movie had that very solid partnership, which is very important because the emphasis is on the main character especially, and I thought some of her reactions to certain events was very good. It was very authentic, so I could actually sympathise for her as the character as she's going through the series of, you know, these very dangerous things, and so that was good. And so it builds up to a very shocking climax that I actually thought worked, because there was enough detail there to actually absorb you into it. And as the plot starts to thicken, I thought to myself, there are some generic moments, but overall, as far as a very limited things that this movie had, I thought they used it very, very well. But unfortunately, the biggest problem is that it just doesn't have that cinematic feel to it, and that it's not its fault. It's because it doesn't have the money. But unfortunately, if you have a limited setting, a limited characters, it does become a stage play, and thankfully the story is good enough for it to really keep it maintained as far as the impressive qualities are concerned, but it just doesn't have that cinematic quality to actually make it really memorable. In fact, after you see this movie, you'll say to yourself, I watched a good film, but when you wake up the next day, you're probably not going to remember it. It's because of that stage play sort of feel, and that's ultimately the film's biggest problem, but at the same time, it's a problem that really couldn't have been avoided. This could have been a really bad film, but the director has enough quality to make it a movie that is definitely worth your time and effort to watch. But I probably wouldn't go out of my way to see it, but if you come across it, I definitely think there are worse movies out there that you could spend 77 minutes of your life with. And so if it sounds like your kind of thing, I definitely think there's a lot to like about this movie. As far as low budget horror films are concerned, I'm going to give The Glass Coffin 3 stars. Alright guys, that's it for my review. Hope you enjoyed it. Till next time, keep watching movies, and I'll see you later.